they sometimes think I have to do it all and I have to prove myself. And that's the thing that we carry. And that leads to burning out even quicker. And especially for high performers, because they're always applauded for being the high performer. They're always said, such a good job, keep doing it. And so sometimes it's basically to get that external recognition and reward, but sometimes it's also your own internal drive because you're so ambitious on the things that you want to get done that you push yourself. So it's so important to actually be self-aware.
Well, Dipti, I'm so excited to chat with you today. We have a lot to talk about. We had a great coffee chat, virtual coffee chat, and getting to know each other. And you're just a remarkable leader, and not only leader of others and the work that you've done, but now being a leader in the fractional space and leading yourself and working with clients. So I'm excited to hear how things have been progressing for you. But before we get into all of that and more, I want you to share your journey with our audience so they can get to know you too.
Yeah, absolutely. And just having that conversation that we both had, it was such a joyful conversation. And this is one of those things that I actually feel like I'm doing more of now, which is connecting with more people. And I encourage more people to just also do that in the space of online world, that we actually don't take that many opportunities. Just connect with people, get on the camera and, share a 30-minute virtual coffee chat. It just is so many different ways to exchange ideas and just know each other. And to answer your question a little bit about myself, today I'm a leadership coach and a product consultant as well. I have almost 20 years of experience building digital products. I started out being a data analytics person. My background is tech and worked in the B2B space. I was an individual contributor for a long time, took on different roles, and I became a leader after that. And very soon, very quickly, I loved being a leader. And I knew that early on that it wasn't just about, leading one person. It was about leading teams cross functionally. I just loved doing that work. And that essentially led me to become head of product in my last role. And I had reached a point that I was like, okay, I still love this work, but I am also at this point where I'm ready to pivot myself. I needed something new to be doing and something more challenging as well. And that's when I actually left my full-time role. I stepped away from that and I had this thing that I want to be, I was so passionate about doing this work that I do now, which is basically working with mid to senior level women in tech. And I've worked with women who are not in tech as well, but essentially helping them grow their professional journey as well. So I've been focusing my time and energy on that. And I kept saying, I will do it someday. I will do it someday. And even when I was in my product role, I had gotten my certifications done. I knew this was background. Someday I'm going to make this pivot. And so 2023 is when I actually made that pivot. And I love this work that I'm doing now. And part of it was also, does this mean that I have to actually give up doing the product work as well? And I still love building products. So I said, I think I can do both. And that's the nice thing of what you can do today, which is you don't have to pick one path and stick on it. You can have multiple different things. There's this portfolio career, which I don't think existed when I was younger, and now it does. And so how nice it is to be able to actually, the privilege of actually being able to choose different things to do in life.
I love that, Dipti. And one of the ways that we connected was understanding some of the challenges that we all face, but particularly what women can face when it comes to burnout in our roles and as leaders, because so much can be asked of us and it can be very draining and very challenging. And I'm curious, especially when you're transitioning from one role to another, when you've been the specialist and you're becoming the leader and learning how to work with people, how do you safeguard yourself and create the boundaries that you need so that you're not burning yourself out and then wearing yourself so thin that you can't serve the people that you're working with?
That's such a great question. And I wish that I had actually been more mindful of that myself. And now I actually do ask my coaches or mentees that I work with when they bring this up. And to your point, women tend to be more burned out because they actually don't know when it is time to stop. and pivot, do something else, or even ask for help. They sometimes think, I have to do it all and I have to prove myself. And that's the thing that we carry. And that leads to burning out even quicker. And especially for high performers, because they're always applauded for being the high performer. They're always said, such a good job, keep doing it. And so sometimes it's basically to get that external recognition and reward, but sometimes it's also your own internal drive because you're so ambitious on the things that you want to get done that you push yourself. So it's so important to actually be self aware. Now, to your point, the question is, how do you actually be mindful of that when you're changing jobs? There are two parts to it. When you're actually changing or pivoting into a leadership role, the first part of it is you're just kind of taking everything in. You're learning. In that stage of learning, you also want to actually share, saying, I'm listening, I'm learning, and I'm actually part of this group that is doing everything. And then there's the stage you go into that just becomes the doer stage. Then you become such an expert at it that you're just doing everything. And then you become that person who's solving everybody's problems. And then you actually forget going, how do I actually draw boundaries where I can actually take time for myself to recharge? What can I do outside of work that I can actually bring energy and joy in myself that I can actually show up that way at work as well? And we forget how important it is to just slow down. And when you're going fast, you think going fast is the most important thing, but that's actually not true. It's actually very important to slow down, like really slow down for yourself. And then once you actually can take account of what's really going on internally to you, that's when you can actually realize going, I'm actually going, these are signs that I am burning out. There's this awareness of, yes, these are the signs that I'm burning out and I need to actually mix it up or change something up quickly. Sometimes staying at the same place, you can still do a lot of different things and you can still be great. And sometimes you've actually done all of it already. And by whatever reason of loyalty or anything else, you're just sticking it out there and it's just time to change. And it's so hard for women. It's so hard in terms of the place, the team that's given them recognition. It's hard for them to just give up and basically say, oh, I'm going to change this particular company or this environment or department as well.
It's the idea of slowing down to speed up, but I don't, but it's not rushing like you were saying, right? So I don't want to give the impression that we are trying to get to a state of rushing, but it's that idea that if we can slow ourselves down and pause, then we can create the capacity for more speed later on. But if we try to hit the ground running at breakneck speed, then we're going to run out of steam really, really quickly. And I was actually, there was a situation scenario that I was working through with a manager a while ago. And it was the idea of pausing and taking a breath, a moment when you're trying to help out your team or make a decision or simply be present and aware and listening rather than trying to multitask and juggle everything all at once and around you, because there are going to be so many different pulls on our time and our attention and things that are demanding of us. And we have to know how to prioritize, because maybe, maybe as women, we think we can multitask and maybe think we can multitask better than men, but I don't believe anyone can truly multitask. That you have to have your attention focused, and yet that's the trap that we can fall into. And so part of it is recognizing where your attention needs to be, and that's the prioritizing. And then the other part is what you're speaking to, which is that slowing down, taking a pause, taking that moment, because time will pass and fly whether we know it or not. But if you haven't taken that time for yourself to ground yourself, then that's where I think we can get into that trap.
You put that so well. And there was a time that I used to very pridefully say that I'm very good at multitasking. And honestly, there I've learned, there is nothing such as multitasking. You are continuously context switching. You're unable to
Mhm.
give the focus that something needs your focus. And you're actually splitting your presence from one thing to the other so quickly that you can't actually give it the depth when it comes to those very important needle moving things that need to be done.
Yeah.
For me, the high performer is somebody who is very self motivated and they're ambitious. They have big plans. They want to actually do a lot of things. They want to achieve a lot of things. They want to build a lot of things. And the product world is like gaining this experience that they can have. And to your point, I also don't see as people just leading people or having a team as leaders. I think, especially in the product world, I've seen is individual contributors can be really great leaders as well. In individual product managers, individual engineering managers, they can be great leaders. And because they're doing a lot of different things that is actually leading others, and we're going towards something in terms of achieving certain business outcomes and aligning people and getting through challenging areas and tasks. And those are the type of things that high performers actually thrive in. They love that aspect of the challenge and being able to get through that challenge. And the other part I'll say is they love the continuous aspect of growing. The idea of continuous growth is something they like. It's not necessarily saying climbing up the ladder per se, but it's like they were learning this X number of things, and there's a new tool that came out, or there's a new language that came out, and they're one of the first few people who'll jump in and learn those things, and they'll bring it back to the team saying, I researched this and this is what we can do about it. This is how we can actually apply these. So to me, those are those people, like internally, those qualities for them, for anyone listening, is like, are you very ambitious? You always want to make sure that you're continuously growing. Very quickly, when I talk to high performers who actually are stuck, there are a couple of levers I can see that are essentially not working for them. Like the areas where they feel they're stuck is they're no longer doing things that were interesting to them. They're essentially people who like doing complicated things, but they're now sucked into like more admin stuff. They're not doing anything strategic. They're not building the latest and greatest and exciting thing. They're somehow behind the scenes and all of that. That's where they essentially start identifying, going, I'm not growing. And so when they start saying, I'm not growing, you kind of know that it's one of their things that they really value a lot, and they're not actually getting to do that. And when you're not living by your values, very quickly everything seems like this isn't working for me.
That's a good part or point that you made, that I don't think that everybody considers that when they think about their high performers, and how if they aren't feeling excited about the work or adequately challenged, then it can feel very robotic and maybe even demoralizing in a sense too, of the kind of impact they're having. And so I'm wondering, you know, if you are a leader of a high performer, what is a best practice, would you say, in order to help those high performers feel challenged, feel energized? And I would give the caveat, maybe appropriately challenged, because what is challenging for them might not be challenging for somebody else, or might be too challenging for somebody else. So like learning where's the balance, so they don't get burned out. And then, keeping them excited, keeping them engaged so that they are contributing the value that they want to give. And at the same time, not lacking in any kind of nurturing of the folks on your team who are putting in the effort and the value and the hard work, and maybe not at that high performer level. And there's nothing wrong with that, but knowing that you have different people on your team who are giving effort at different capacities, maybe.
Yeah. And I want to just touch on something where you actually did bring up saying not everybody on the team is a high performer, and that's completely okay. Everyone's not expected to be a high performer on a team. Some people bring their best, and sometimes that's enough to be on the team. You're bringing value, you're there, you're actually just satisfied with the amount of work you're given, and you have your priorities set differently, and still the work that you bring in is very valuable to the team, and they appreciate what you're actually giving to the team as well. So that's a difference between that person is a really good performer as well, but this person that we're talking about as a high performer, they want that growth aspect continuously. They're seeking that. They want to actually feel that the work that they're doing is meaningful, and it's in a way it's something that is leading them to growth. So that is so important, from just, I would say, from having so many conversations with high performers, and when they actually get to the point of when they're stuck, it's essentially what has not worked for them is some of the leaders have not checked in with them if the work that they're still doing is working for them. If the role that they're given is still aligned with what they have for their long term plans. If in many times I've challenged them to go back to their managers and have these conversations to the point saying, this work I'm doing is not satisfying. It's not really like I'm not enjoying it as much. I need something a little bit more challenging. I need something. I know I'm going to use the word exciting. It's not that work is exciting, but you understand the point, which is that it is stretching them. It is like it's beyond their
Yeah.
comfort level, and they have to go and maybe do a little bit of reading or researching or doing something that actually helps them fill that part of them. That is basically they're having to go and learn something and apply it at work. And so that part of it, I've seen the common theme there is that the managers have either stopped checking in with them or they've gotten to a point where they've become such leaders that people just expect that you're a leader now and nobody needs to check in with you. And yes, here you go. With everything that you're doing, all this other admin stuff also comes to you and you're responsible for all of this other stuff.
Yeah. I'm glad you made the differentiation because I think it's important. And again, emphasizing, you need every type of performer on the team, except I will say the caveat being the underperformer, right? We need
Yes.
we need people that that are perform, but in terms of the differentiation between the two, we need both the
Yeah.
performer and the high performer to balance each other out. And I'm glad we're talking about it because we haven't I don't think we've talked really about this in any episode that I've recorded, but it's worth noting and being able to observe so that you can know how to support each type of person on your team with the best kind of tools and resources that they need. And to your point, that high performer is going to look for that growth and that opportunity. I've also noticed sometimes that there are folks who don't always know themselves and don't necessarily know the type that they are and if they are a high performer or not. And maybe they lack some of the hard skills or soft skills that would put them in that category, and they want to get there. So I'm curious, do you feel like it's possible for someone to grow into that if they are looking to exceed the expectations they've set for themselves? If they're looking to be that high performer, is it possible to, train into that and grow into that?
Just the fact that if they're interested in becoming that person, I think that it's completely possible. I say go with your curiosity. The fact that it's not necessarily saying thinking about work after work also, but the idea that you don't necessarily keep a track on I've done with my work stuff. So if I'm going to do this research or this reading, I'm not going to do this outside of my work time. But there is that genuine curiosity in yourself that you want to go learn things, you want to actually read stuff because you know that it's not necessarily just for your company's sake or your organization's sake. It's your own growth. That's what I see mostly where people are. And it can matter in what phase of your life you are in. So say you're actually stretched for time and you have little ones at home, and at that point your priorities are slightly different where you don't even have the bandwidth to take on anything additional. At that point, you're basically saying, I am interested in this particular technical skill or this XYZ thing, but I know my time's going to come when I have a little bit more space in my life where I can actually be heads down and be doing certain type of research or looking into these things or building stuff, and I'll make myself available for that, right? So that's just that recognition going. I also say that, one size does not fit all. So it's like knowing what life phase you're in, that is so important to take that into account and then basically say, okay, now's my time. Now I actually want to be that person. And what are the skills that I bring here? What is valuable to me? And what can I actually bring as my expertise to this team itself? That's where I think you can actually make that shift from going from just being an okay performer, a great performer, to actually saying, I'm going to become a high performer.
I love that, Dipti. That's great advice. And I hope that helps folks who are out there too, because I'm using this to sort of take us down the path of moving like you did in your career from that specialist role to a leader of specialists. And I can imagine even in any industry, it's going to be a challenge, but I've talked to other folks who talk about some of the challenges for specialists in tech and in product development where it can be especially challenging going from being the specialist who knows how to do that job to then managing the whole team that's working on the project and some of the challenges that are there. And maybe there are a couple of similarities for everybody in every type of transition like that, but are there any for you, particularly in that space where you had to then pivot your thinking or your approach or just recognize that the work you were doing is different? Did you have to go through a process for yourself, I guess is what I'm getting at.
You bring up such a good point about this, and this is what I've always seen. The path to actually growth, in a way, when you're really great at, I'll use an example of, just engineering. Let's say an engineer is really good at what he or she's doing. They get recognized for that work, and then they actually get promoted for that work. They become such experts at the end. Then they reward them with becoming a people manager. And guess what? Up until now, they were rewarded for being technical and solving those type of problems, and now they have people to manage. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're very well equipped. It's not to say they can become great managers, is that they're not well equipped at this point to actually just start leading teams. Solving problems on your own, doing solo work, and probably even just working in a team of peers is very different from actually having to now lead a team. And a lot of people don't get that basic training, in an environment of what does it actually mean to be a new manager. There's a lot of responsibility on you. As soon as you become a new manager, you're not just necessarily responsible for your own work. Now you're responsible for actually motivating other humans. I think that's really the hardest part of this, which is like having the vision and having everybody follow you and keeping everybody motivated and challenging them enough that they actually are still fulfilled in their roles as well.
Like you leading us through that step by step, because that's exactly what I've seen and experienced and talked through with others, is that very idea that you get so good at your job, maybe in the scenario we were talking through where you are that great performer or performer level, move into high performer, and then because you keep getting better and better, you're handed that responsibility of being a people manager, and that is a totally different job, different set of skills, different needs. So I'm curious, when you were on the team and not yet leading people, were there qualities or traits in a leader that you admired or some things that you were frustrated by? Not saying that your leaders were bad bosses, but were there ever times when you experienced situations where you got frustrated by the style of leadership, or you just knew that you wanted to emulate the good examples that were set for you?
Yeah, there's so many good examples. I would say I was lucky enough to be in an environment where I actually was surrounded by great leaders. And one of the things I really liked about being around great leaders is just honest conversations, the transparency of what's going on. The times that actually felt frustrating for me were things that were going on behind the scenes that I didn't know about, what was going on in the company or something else, some challenging situations with the company. Those were things that when I wasn't aware or figuring out going, why is there such a lack of transparency? Those would get frustrating to me. But then where you actually have small group meetings or team meetings where your leaders actually share the challenges and they can actually reframe them as how can we as a team solve some of those things. Those used to feel very motivating to me. No matter how difficult those times were, you as a person feel like, I know I can actually bring something to the team that can help this team, that can help my organization. So at the end of the day, every individual, when they're working for an organization, they want to see that when where they're spending their 8 to 10 hours of their day is meaningful in some way, and that it's aligned to the top business goals or the top outcomes that the business actually wants. So it's very important to see that. And the other thing is just, I would say, is just the culture of the company and just the sense of belonging in a team. And I do say that it is not just the leader's responsibility on how all of that forms as well, but in some ways it is important for the leader to actually make sure that they're seeing that the culture is actually maintained. It's a great vibe. There's enthusiasm on the team. People are excited. And when they see their challenges, they can actually bring in experts to help with some of those challenges. So those are things that I would say that, just the honest conversations are things that I think I most valued. Even just feedback, like, those one-on-one feedbacks, that things that when I didn't necessarily do something really well early on in my career, I would get those feedback from my managers or other leaders. And that would be in the one-on-one setting saying, you did this well, but you could do this better. And that I would take in terms of just taking that and making myself better. So I think it's really important that feedback also is given and not necessarily shying away sometimes from people's feelings, saying, I'm going to hurt this person if I tell them honestly. And I did do that mistake early on in my career, which is I wanted to always be the person who was liked on the team or the manager who was liked. So I would let go of a lot of things, like turn the other way of like not necessarily wanting to give feedback. But I learned over time saying, yes, these are some fundamental things that I think stay true in a long run, which is give feedback when appropriate and let go of anybody who's an underperformer. The quicker, the better. So it's some of those things, some of those decisions that you keep dragging on, which is basically saying, I'm going to give this person the fifth chance and the sixth chance. And if you've gone beyond what you need to, you actually need to have made those changes, because it's not just about that one person, it's about everybody else on the team that's observing, saying you are tolerating this bad behavior. So you're kind of setting that precedence that it's okay to do something this way.
Glad you highlight that. I've definitely experienced that and learned the lesson of, how it didn't get to the point where it was demoralizing the team per se, but managers were struggling and not, we exhausted all possible training, support opportunity, everything we could do for the person. And I feel like, as long as you have exhausted what is within your power and control to be able to help someone, if they aren't able to perform in the way, in the standards and expectations. And this is where I would emphasize make sure that you do have those expectations for people. Otherwise, you're judging them off of unfair parameters, unspoken parameters, perhaps. But assuming that teams and companies have that in place, then yeah, I've seen firsthand how crucial it is. And then, the other part of it I also see is that if the person is not performing at the minimum level required, it can be just as demoralizing for them too. And it might be a situation where they're not in the right seat on the bus, metaphorically, and they are probably going to be happier in another job at another company. And so while letting someone go can be the hardest day of their life or one of the hardest days of their life, and certainly a challenging day for you too, it's probably in both of your benefits that you're releasing that relationship, that work relationship. And it's still, I'm not diminishing the hard aspect of it, and making those decisions can be very difficult, especially if you are intentionally carefully considering the outcome. But at the same time, you have to think about the health of your team and the health of your company, and making sure that the folks on your team are aligned with what you need. And so I'm glad you make that distinction too, Dipti. It's hard. I always say it never gets any easier when you're going through that type of situation, but that's also the responsibility of a leader too, is to be able to make those decisions in the benefit of the work and the team that you're working with. So, yeah.
I was just going to add also one other thing there is that I know we just talked about underperformance, but there's also an alignment issue sometimes. Sometimes you teams get shuffled
Mm,
up and then you're bringing somebody and you're putting them in a seat which they have no background on. They've never done something. They've not been trained for this. And now they're all of a sudden taking on a completely new role. And the expectation is that that person's going to perform well in that new role. So sometimes it's an alignment issue also. And you give as much possible there. And if it doesn't still work, at some point you actually still have to say, okay, this we tried and this didn't work.
yeah, that's another great point. I'm curious, what do you do in that situation? Seen it from a distance, not necessarily directly that I can recall, but I've seen it from a distance where folks are put in different roles that they're not suited for. They've been promoted And so it's not a case necessarily of hiring someone directly for the role and it not working out, but they've been with the company, they've been promoted, and there isn't that alignment there. From my point of view, it would be incredibly hard to demote them, and the sort of embarrassment and frustration and, the shame that would probably surround them if that were to happen. So how, and you don't want to necessarily let them go because they were a great person in the original role that you had them in. So how do you navigate that? That's a whole other challenge.
Yeah, I would say that reorg is so common these days in terms of just how everyone gets shuffled into different positions and different roles and expectation of now you're responsible for not just this, but more than this. And, or you were doing this, but now you're actually going to be doing something completely different. I think it's so important that the manager and their direct report, they're aligned. I'm surprised how many people don't actually ask their managers, am I meeting your expectations? Like in this new role that I'm doing, what are some of my top expectations? Like, what are your top three things or top few things that you are expecting that I deliver on? And there's a lot of unsaid stuff which doesn't get clarified. Then the manager's thinking about something else, the person's thinking about something else. So it's just very like, upfront, just be clear saying, what are my expectations in this next 3 to 6 months? What are you expecting from me? And when would you like to give me feedback? How should I seek feedback from you? And tell them your style, which is basically say, I know this is a new role and I'm actually going to do a few things incorrectly, or I hope that I actually make a few mistakes so that I can learn from them. But how would you like to give me that feedback that I'm actually off track and I need to actually come back to doing something differently? So just having the courage, it's a hard conversation, but having the courage to have that conversation, I think makes it easier on both sides.
And if you are asking your manager, they might not have an answer for you right away, but ask them to think about it. I've certainly been in that position where been delightfully surprised when someone asks me and we're having maybe, a conversation about something else and then we revisit that later on. I think people asking, it's a good way to get the feedback you need. And if your manager is also open to asking for feedback, then you can have that reciprocity so that you can all get better too. Because I think having that 360-degree feedback can be really helpful in moving a team or just even, moving an individual forward. So I'm glad you share that. I know we're coming to the end of our time. And Dipti, we could just talk for hours. I think we'll have to have you back for sort of more conversation. So I know you have an analyst background, and so I'm sure, I don't want to assume, but I'm sure data is very important to you. And at the same time, I wonder, do you have to go with any intuition or observation versus straight numbers and the raw data? And I preface that with, for myself, I love data and I love what it can do in terms of helping us make decisions and giving us greater insight. I'm wondering, is there a way to blend it with the additional kind of information that you're receiving off of people and how you approach using that in your leadership?
Yeah, I would say it's based on context. I don't necessarily have a great answer for that other than to say it depends on the context that you're looking at. Now, if it's something that you're looking at saying this particular feature on the product, how is it actually being used by our customers? Then purely looking at the data works in terms of just the quantitative side of looking at the data and making sense of it. But I really do believe in when it comes to leadership, data is only one part of it, and then there's the other part of it that you have to bring, to your point, a little bit of experience, a little bit of intuition. Even though the data says this, it seems right to do this and this based on some qualitative conversations that you may have had with customers. And sometimes those qualitative things are really hard to kind of quantify. So it's both in terms of product, you have to actually look at the quantitative and the qualitative side of things as you're looking at that. And then in leadership, I look at it is like leadership is mostly that particular aspect of it is a lot of it has to do with your emotional intelligence and making great decisions. So doing right by everybody is important, but these two things are just, I think it's given that if you're a leader, those are the things that you get challenged with because none of this are easy. Sometimes you're given such hard decisions to make. Neither seems like a great decision. Sometimes you have to, the team. That's never a great thing to do, but you are supposed to do it because you're actually looking at the numbers on the business side, and that's the right thing to do at that moment. And then the other side is the emotional side, which is actually, we forget a business is a collection of people. If there are no people, there is no business, unless, there's a different world that we're building right now, which is solo people working with AI. That's completely different, but in the traditional sense, it's a collection of people working with each other. And if when this group of people come together and working towards the collective same goal, there's amazing, amazing things that you actually do together.
Whether you're leading a team or coaching them in their own leadership abilities. So I want to make sure that people have a chance to connect with you and reach out if they want to benefit from your coaching. Where's the best place for people to find you online?
Absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn and people can search me up, Dipti Patel. You'll actually find me on there and DM me. I just love listening from people, connecting with people, and just how we connected as well. I love to see how I can be of help to others. And then I also do like writing. So very recently I've been writing on this aspect of just different ways in growing personal development in your career. And I do that on Substack. So it's deeptipatel.substack.com.
All the links below, and everybody can connect with you on their preferred platform. But I hope they also connect with you on the leadership coaching because, Dipti, you have such a wealth of experience and understanding and a graciousness in just in our conversations alone. So I know you're a great leader and a coach because of that. And our audience is so awesome for tuning in. Thank you all for listening to another episode of Bad Bosses, Great Leaders. Dipti, you are welcome back anytime, and we will catch you all on the next one.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Rebecca.